I put it to all of you that Australian farmers have been duped. They have been failed miserably by industry and political representatives who have consistently taken a blinkered approach to animal cruelty in the live export industry. They have been constantly assured, the farmers, that their animals are well looked after, and this assurance has given them confidence in a market that couldn't be shakier. Never again will the live export industry be allowed to operate under the shroud of secrecy that has kept it going for so long. The RSPCA will not allow it, the Australian public won't allow it now, but most of all, the farmers finally won't allow it. The second reason Indonesia was a turning point relates to the overwhelming public response, the outpouring of grief and outrage that has put this government and future governments on notice. And let's reflect on that public response for a moment. At least 158,000 letters were sent to our Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. The same number went to the Minister of Agriculture, Joe Ludwig. He deserves that. 100,000 letters went to other parliamentarians. In the days after Four Corners aired, MPs were telling us they were getting hundreds of emails a day, and almost 1 million people have taken a deep breath and watched the footage so they could see the suffering for themselves. Then help us give these animals the strongest representation possible, because our parliamentarians aren't. Lastly, what Indonesia has highlighted so publicly is that live export is a risky business, particularly for northern cattle producers. They have only one product and only one customer, a customer that at any time can pull the rug from beneath them. In fact, Indonesia has already said that by 2014 it wants to be producing all of its own beef. Surely an industry body doing its job properly would be focusing efforts on finding new beef markets for our cattle producers, not simply shoring up what is a short-term market. The shockwaves of Indonesia are being felt right across the Middle East, the scene of years of incredible suffering and cruelty against our Australian animals. I know no one will ever forget the shattering images of those Australian steers in Indonesia, abandoned by exports and failed by Australia. But let's remember the 3 to 4 million sheep sent to the Middle East every year that suffer in silence. Timmy, let's hear from you, mate. It's an outrage that action is never taken to protect our animals unless the industry is forced to act, and the only way to force change has been to expose what they are doing. Australians in their droves have stood up and said they are fed up, and with yet another live export scandal, and that animal welfare is no longer negotiable. Thank you so much for being here today. The good news, everybody, is that a kinder future for Australian animals, away from the cruelty of live export, is not only possible, but it's preferable for our economy and for job creation in Australia. Our global meat exports are worth $6 billion a year, 6 times more than our live exports. A sheep processed here in Australia is worth 20% more to our economy than a sheep sent overseas alive. Australia sends halal certified meat to every country we send our animals to. The Muslim community says that's fine by the Quran. In fact, the Middle East is now our largest market for prime lamb and mutton, with sheep meat exports to the region worth $110 million more than live exports last year. Australia's biggest meat processors have come out swinging against live export trade, saying it's cannibalising the domestic beef sector. The meat unions estimate that 40,000 jobs have been lost to live export since the trade began. And what about the country towns and their economies, which have been destroyed by this fearful trade? Every animal exported overseas, Timmy, for slaughter takes Australian jobs with it. Every animal exported overseas for slaughter also takes with it a piece of Australia's reputation as a decent nation. Now this trade's staunch defenders have over the past 2 months tried to suggest the wave of public support to end the live export trade reflects a divide between city and country. That city folk, this is what they're saying, that city folk don't understand what happens on a farm. We know cruelty when we see it. Well, I give the Aussie farmers a lot more credit than that. We know Aussie farmers do things better, and that's why we want to keep Australian animals on Australian soil where they're at least protected by Australian law. This bill before the Federal Parliament this coming Thursday, the 18th of August, will, if it's supported by our parliamentarians, enact a 3-year phase-out of live